Now, One Night in Dudelange is a book about UCD's travels across Europe, an unexpected travel across Europe, and the author of that book, Kevin Burke, you're in studio with me. How are you?
How are you?
So first of all, why did you decide to write this book?
This is a story I kind of fell into. This is games I've been to myself. I've gone to UCD games for years and years. I think the overall story, if you ask any League of Ireland player or supporter or official or anything like that to name some of their best moments in the game, you're going to get so many stories about European games. And I want to just write something that takes the full inside experience of one of those campaigns and follows it through to see what makes it such an experience.
And this is one of the more rare European journeys. I know it is a rare thing for an Irish team to be competing in Europe in the first place, but this especially is probably one of the more rare stories you come across.
Yeah, I mean, this was unusual. UCD, a college side, had just been relegated at the end of the previous year. They qualified fairly luckily through the Fair Play Award. Ireland were third in the Fair Play. UCD were third in the Irish Fair Play, but Dundalk and Cork, first and second, had already qualified. So it was kind of almost by default that UCD got in the first place. And yet it led to what was probably one of the most memorable European campaigns of the last decade, if you leave aside Dundalk and Rovers getting into the group stages.
So we'll start from the beginning. UCD, a college side. For those who are listening or watching who don't follow League of Ireland football, UCD have a very unique structure as a club. Yeah,
the squad of players here, the focus would have been on actual UCD players. If you want to sign and play for the club, you're going to have to be going to UCD as a college. There's guys here who in 5th and 6th year in school, they needed to have UCD on their CA application form, and they needed to get their leaving cert and get the points to get into UCD to keep up their career with the club. There was a couple of players filling out the squad who had been not UCD players. The club actually called them outsiders. But by and large, 80% of that squad would have been in UCD, just finished the previous year or two, or in 5th and 6th year in school, looking to go into UCD.
And I suppose this year an example of that is Gary O'Neill, who signed for Shamrock Rovers because he was finishing in UCD and he could no longer compete for the club. So firstly, that initially puts UCD immediately on the back foot when it comes to keeping their talent.
Absolutely. I mean, it isn't that he couldn't stay with the club, but we couldn't afford to keep him anymore. The idea that a club like UCD could keep a player like Gary for 4.5 years is amazing, as well, down to the fact that he was doing his degree. But look, players come and go, and best look to Gary where he is scoring the winner in the cup final now is a achievement.
I suppose what I meant by that was initially you can offer these players a college degree to come here. So it's a brilliant place to sort of develop young talent and offer them a life outside of football as well when they finish.
Absolutely, yeah. But you're right, once you leave college, just there's extra pressures and players will move on.
So it's either go into the degree of your choice or you go into professional football, which Gary O'Neill chose to do.
Yep.
So UCD, they start off the season back into the first division after being relegated the following year, or the year before, sorry. And for some reason, they get into Europe. Can you explain to us how that happened? It was through the UEFA Fair Play rules. UCD had finished third in Ireland's Fair Play bracket, and Ireland finished third in the overall bracket across Europe.
Pretty much. The Fair Play is gone now. This was the last year of the Fair Play, but the idea was that the top 3 countries in Europe in the Fair Play Award would each get a bonus place in the Europa League for the winners of their domestic Fair Play Award. As a UCD were third, but Cork were second, and they were in Europe. Dundalk were first; they were in Europe as well. So by default, it actually fell down to third. And the margin of getting into Europe was tiny. I think Ireland qualified by 0.003 points, and the difference was 6 months earlier Finland had played Malta in an under-17s qualifier. Finland leading 2-0, 10 minutes to go, their keeper gets booked, and that is the difference. That's what got UCD into Europe. 1 yellow card.
How do they monitor that, do you know?
Every UEFA game in terms of senior internationals, junior internationals, women's internationals, UEFA club games, not domestic league games, every one of those games is UEFA Observer, and the UEFA Observer scores the home and away team based on 6 criteria. And it gets quite technical, but you're talking 10 points for general respect of the players, general respect of the fans. You're talking other points for red and yellow cards, attacking play, and all this kind of stuff. And it can even seem a bit arbitrary. And when you get down to UCD qualifying by 0.003 points, is it just the case that one official came away from one match thinking these are actually quite a nice bunch of guys, and that was one extra mark, and that got UCD in?
Yeah, it's a really bizarre rule when you
it really is
when you boil it down. And going into the season as well, of course, we spoke about UCD's unique structure, but also First Division football is a completely different animal to Premier Division football when it comes to holding on to the team. And their squad is just plundered of all their talent.
Pretty much so. That the club, I think 11, 12 first teamers left over the pre-season, so you're looking to see what's there. You're looking at your 19s, you're looking at bringing players through. You're starting off the first match of the season, you've 8 players in the squad who've never played League of Ireland before. These guys don't even know who they are. And yet 3-4 months later, they're taking on a team of seasoned Luxembourg internationals. Dudelange have been in the group stages the last 2 years, and they're beating them. So just that escalation is remarkable. So
they go into the UEFA draw for the Europa League qualifying round, and a couple of different options of who they can get. They can either have a trip to Azerbaijan if they want, Slovakia, Norway, Dudelange in Luxembourg, and Domžale in Slovenia. And some of those names are actually familiar enough for people who follow Irish teams in Europe. But it's Dudelange they eventually get drawn against. And it's probably good for Collie O'Neill, whose wife is expecting around the time the game is about to happen.
In the end of the day, this book is about 4 football games, and that isn't hugely interesting in itself, but a lot of the interest, I think, is in the behind-the-scenes stuff, in terms of licensing, in terms of logistics, in terms of how you actually get the games, in terms of how you scout the opposition, all this kind of stuff. And there's the human side of things. You're right, Collie O'Neill, his wife was expecting their 3rd child, and was expecting it about a couple of days before the home leg. So he's there looking, God, if I'm off to Azerbaijan, I'm going to be gone for 3 or 4 days. The wife's going to absolutely kill me about that. He was looking for somewhere as close as possible, and that's what he got. As it turned out, of course, one of the stories that made national news at the time was when the team flew home. They landed in Dublin Airport after knocking out Dudelange, and Collie got home about half an hour later. He was straight off down to Hollow Street. So it was that tight that was.
Yeah, you do get some interesting insights into the preparation that goes into these games as well, especially for a club the size of UCD. You don't expect to be there in the first place. They're not used to being here. And there's a lot of things they have to get in order before they actually go and play that match in Dudelange. And
it's huge, yeah. And I think you're right that the fact that UCD weren't expecting to get in makes it a lot more difficult, because we qualified in May, and the rest of the League of Ireland teams would have qualified in November at the end of the season. So they had 6 months extra to get everything in play, and they've been there before and done that. I've kind of split some of this up in terms of the players, registering the players. The manager, the ground, the kit. UCD had to throw their kit in the bin. The UEFA said, no, you can't wear that kit in Europe. There's 67 pages of guidelines as to what kit you can and can't wear in Europe, and the club fell foul of a couple of small little things. The sponsor logo was too big. There was no numbers on the shorts. There was a second sponsor in the back, and UEFA said you can't play in that. So they had 6 weeks to get an entire new set of kit together. When they got it, they had to go through all sorts of spectrophotometric analysis to see what colour it was, and to see what colours it was going to clash with, and to see if there was no patch around the number in the back of the jersey, and the difference in between the mathematical number that the colour of the number was and the colour of the jersey was. All these things had to be taken into account. Fairly standard test, but when you're looking at the UEFA guidelines there, it's some of it is mind-boggling.
I suppose you can prepare better if you're actually expecting to be into the competition, and it sort of throws into the bizarreness of this fair play rule. Like, why do they have it if they're going to expect teams to not be prepared for the competition when it comes down to it?
Yeah. Now again, I mean, Ireland have the advantage. It's a summer season, so we finish a lot earlier. The smaller, in fact, Ireland before the summer season would have been in a similar position. The season ends in April, and 2 months later you're back in European action. But it was quite tough.
One of the better stories from this, and it's something that's it shows you the respect that both Irish people had for UCD in this competition, and also their opponents, Dudelange in Luxembourg, fully expected to get through, and they had a private jet or a chartered flight booked for the next fixture in the next round. But UCD shock everyone by getting through just about by the skin of their teeth. Yeah. Ryan Swan scores goals in both of the games to put them through, and they end up taking that chartered flight that Dudelange had booked to Slovakia for the next round.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing with the logistics. When the draw was made for the first round, well, they made the draw for the second round the same day. So UCD and Dudelange knew that if they won, they were playing either Slovan Bratislava or College Europa. So the club directors are out there in the draw at Switzerland, and they could talk to Dudelange and they could talk to the Gibraltar team, and the Gibraltar team said, "Oh, thanks very much, lads, for introducing you. We won't be winning this game. We won't be going to Dublin, but thanks very much for saying hello." And the Slovakian crowd just said, "Oh yeah, how are you?" and went off and spoke to the Luxembourg people. So they straight off said, "No, we're not playing this Irish team. That's ridiculous. You've actually got to work out where you're going to be," because when we played in Luxembourg, we were expected to be in Slovakia 7 days later. And you're right, to be in Slovakia 7 days later, you've got to be in the airport 5 days later. You've got 5 days to arrange a charter plane and hotel at the peak of summer holiday season. And it's quite difficult. So the club had engaged Abbey Travel to just do all the logistics. Abbey Travel couldn't find a plane. And later on the Friday, after a few hours of looking, they found this charter that was suddenly up for sale. And it had 20 hotel rooms with it as well, unwanted, up for sale. And it was the flight that Dudelange had actually booked to get out to Slovakia themselves. and they put it for sale on the general market, so UCD went and bought Dudelange's plane.
When you were writing this book, did you get any indication on how big the prize money was, or how much of an impact that had on UCD as a club? Because it's 210 grand for getting through the first round of qualifiers. So would that have played in? Would money have been an issue for UCD at this time?
It's one of the things the director says there. Look, it's getting into Europe. It's great. It's money from America. It's a six-figure sum that the club wasn't expecting. That's great. Pay off some debt and start fresh with a new slate. And it was very nice from that point of view to be able to do that. It wasn't a huge factor. Certainly, Europe covered all the costs. One of the interesting things, of course, that the money isn't paid until December. But you can't say to your hotel or your flight system, I'll pay you in December. The money comes in. You've got to find 70 grand per away game up front for these costs. And that's not easy for a League of Ireland club to do. So you either go down to the bank manager and get a loan, or in this case, as it turned out, the college gave the club a loan to tie them over for the 4 or 5 months until UEFA actually paid the money back in.
And then Slovan and Bratislava were up next in the following round from Slovakia. They had a trip to the Bowl first.
No, we were in Bratislava first.
Went to Bratislava first, lost 1-0. It was a tight game, and then they come to UCD, to the college campus. And it's not exactly what they're expecting from a club of their stature, and especially their hardcore fans. Yeah,
you've got 3 players in this team who played at the 2010 World Cup. Vitek was the second top scorer at this World Cup, and now he's playing in UCD. There's lots of stories behind this. The logistics for the tickets was quite difficult because Slovan had a bit of a hooligan problem. Any tickets that were sold had to be run by Bratislava, Slovan Bratislava in Slovakia to see, listen, can we sell tickets to these people? But now you've got people who are buying tickets through Slovan Bratislava in Bratislava and Slovaks who are buying tickets here. And on Garda advice, what they did was actually separate those 2 away ends into 2 separate away ends. And this is all the stuff that you just don't think about in the background. When you just rock up and buy a ticket on the day for a European game, there's all this mad planning that has to go on in the background, and they're the kind of stories that really jump out, I think.
What's the buzz around the campus like at this time?
After we bet Dudelange, there was a load of media interest. We were in The Guardian, we were in the BBC, UEFA.com had an article, all sorts of Irish domestic articles and so on. And the Financial Times came along to do a feature, and they went to talk to the goalkeeper. And they said, what's it like? He wasn't Irish, he had the kind of vision of an American sports campus where everybody's surely fanatic. And he asked the goalkeeper, what's it like now on this campus? And the keeper says, well, the students are all gone home. Sure, there's no buzz. It's summer, people are all gone home. So it was still quite quiet on the campus.
And obviously, the match doesn't go as the first game did. It wasn't a shock. As you said, the Slovakian international scores a hat-trick. He had scored in the World Cup in 2010 as well, so it doesn't come as much as a surprise. But must have been a big thing for UCD as a club to bring them forward a little bit.
Huge, and it's the players more than the club in a way, because it's the players who are playing the games ultimately. You've got players here who are suddenly going up against players who played in the World Cup. Players, as Tomas Boyle, one of the defenders, said, he's actually signed in Championship Manager. This is the level they're playing at. And in that game out in Slovakia, Slovan had a lad sent off after 25 minutes, and they only won it 5 minutes from the end. So it was 0-0 up until 5 minutes to go. This part-time team up against a team of absolute full internationals, every player of full internationals, Premier League experience, all this kind of stuff. And the players, really disappointed at the end of the match, losing 1-0 to a team like that, got the flight home, and as soon as they got home about 1 o'clock in the morning, 4 of them went around to their digs, their flats in campus, and watched the match all over again on television, just recorded it. That's what the buzz was.
And Collie O'Neill, he obviously is more excited about his newborn kid coming along, and he's no longer with UCD, but this definitely did a lot to boost his reputation as manager as well.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. It's a huge experience for him as well, yeah.
So, if people want to read your book, where can they get One Night in Dudelange?
Yeah, you can buy it in Dubrays, you can buy it in the UCD campus bookshop, you can buy it online on Amazon or from the publishers Vision Sports. If you want the authentic experience, come along to UCD game. It's in the shop at half time. That's where you can buy it.
Kevin Burke, thank you.
No worries, thank you.